All right, so I got a question from a viewer about choosing between the DJI Integra goggles versus the DJI goggles N3. And I think it's because these are pretty close in price. Even though the Integra goggles are discontinued, you can get them on the used market for around $250. And this is the N3s are $229 with tax. It's going to be around $250 with shipping and everything. So similar price point. He was asking about this in context of the 04 Air Unit Pro. So probably doesn't matter if it's the Lite or the Pro. You know, between these two, my personal opinion is, or at least what I would go for, is the N3 goggles. And the reason is you basically have 04 technology in the N3 goggles, but you don't have that in the goggles Integra. Yes, they will work with the 04 Pro Air Unit, but they work in a compatibility mode. So what it does, the 04 Air Unit goes into a 03 compatibility mode, so you don't get the range and penetration that you would with the N3 goggles that are actually running true 04 technology. So basically the difference in penetration and range is in terms of advertised range, about 10 kilometers on 03 and 15 kilometers on 04, give or take. That's the difference in the technology. You get an extra 50% in range on 04 technology versus 03. Now, if you're not even going to go anywhere close that far, then it's not going to matter. If 10 kilometers is enough for you, then the Integra goggles will meet your needs, and that's totally fine. But that's one of the main reasons why. The second reason is latency. Now, yes, the Integra goggles do have 100 hertz displays for 100 FPS, but it's in 03 mode, not 04 mode. So the N3 goggles have an 04 mode race mode available to you, and yes, it has a 60 hertz display, but that latency even on the 60 hertz display is lower than on the 100 hertz displays on the Integra goggles because it's running the 03 connection. So the latency is actually higher even on the 100 hertz screens versus the 60 hertz screens on the N3. So again, range is worse, latency is worse, and basically for future proofing, you're a generation behind. 03 is a generation behind, so when the next system comes out in a couple of years probably, or a year and a half, 05, then these are probably going to be I guess sunsetted or end of life, and then you'll be forced to upgrade anyway. So that's another reason why is you're handcuffed to the old 03 technology. And yes, it is. These are smaller and more compact, and the screens are very nice. Of course, optically, they have two screens on here. Images slightly better, but it kind of depends on your eyes. So for example, for me, on the N3 goggles, I wear these with my glasses, which is my exact prescription, and I have some astigmatism, and I know some people that have a lot of astigmatism, they're not able to use these type of goggles, the Integras, the goggles 2 and the goggles 3, because they don't have, at least as far as I know, there aren't any prescription diopter inserts. I think there might be available for the goggles 2, but I don't think there's any for the goggles 3 or the Integra. And then the inserts that you get on here that come with the goggles are they're basically for just power correction and not for astigmatism. So between these two, when I'm wearing obviously my glasses with the N3, the whole screen is crystal clear, sharp everywhere. Whereas I have blurriness in the corners on these because I have the diopter inserts in here, but correct for the power, so it's not blurry everywhere, but it's not sharp everywhere either. So that's something to be aware of if you have eyeglasses prescription like me. If you have 20/20 vision, of course, none of that applies here. It's going to be the same experience in either way for you guys that are lucky enough to not wear glasses. But for those of you who do, I wear my glasses with these, and I actually see better in this one than this one. Now the screen is a little bit dimmer in this one than on the Integras, but it doesn't really bother me too much. And once you get under the goggles, And if there's no light leakage here for me, I kind of forget about that. I notice that at the very beginning of my flight, yeah, it's a little bit dark, but then I quickly adjust to that. It's not a big deal for me. Now, of course, the N3s are a box goggle. It's a single screen. It is somewhat heavier than the Integra goggles, but it doesn't bother me that much. I've actually been using the N3 goggles as my daily driver, and for those of you that follow my channel very closely, you notice that in all of my reviews for the last month or so, this is the goggle that I've been using. I've stopped using the Integras, stopped using the goggles 2 and the goggles 3. I have all of those, but they're sitting on a shelf right now collecting dust because I'm just going to be keeping on using the N3s until I feel like there's a reason I can't use these, which I haven't found yet. So I'm kind of like, that's kind of the reason why I'm doing, I guess, like a 30-day or 60-day challenge here. And maybe, some of the other reviewers out there ought to do this as well. I know a lot of people, they just look at this as box goggles. They think it's inferior. They try them on once or twice, and then they make a video, basically bashing it, saying that no one should buy these. And I think that's a little bit unfair. I think that this is probably going to be the goggle that most people that get into DJI for the first time are going to be getting these goggles. So knowing that, I'm pretty confident in that. I felt like as a reviewer, I needed to basically use this as my daily driver for probably for a few months. I'm probably going to do like a 3-month review and then a 6-month review, and just to give it a fair shake. So far, I haven't found any reason why I can't use this pretty much forever. I've been kind of looking for that. I as well was skeptical about these, but I figured, well, I'm just going to try them every day in all my reviews, fly them all the time, and if I discover issues where I'm like, wow, okay, that I didn't know about because I hadn't flown it for 1,000 times, then I could, maybe I can make a video about that and say, hey, here's some things you should look out for. But so far, nothing like that's happened yet. Now, for me, if you're watching all my videos, I'm not a racer, not a hardcore freestyler. I don't do bando bashing. So for the kind of flying that you see in my videos, these goggles are going to be completely fine. Now, if you're a different kind of pilot, of course, you have different needs, and all the stuff that I'm saying here probably isn't going to apply to you, and you're going to have to evaluate things a little bit differently. Probably have to do some more research on your own, I'm afraid. But for most people that are just getting into FPV, or these are going to be fine. The N3s are going to work out really well, and you'll probably find you're going to not have to upgrade for a while, if at all. So that's my answer between these two. Which one I would get and why. It's going to be the N3 goggles, and it's because you want to be on the O4 technology if you're going to be using O4 air units. So one question or one thing that people are going to mention is that the N3 goggles will only work with the Avata 2, the Neo, and the O4 and the O4 Pro, and it's not compatible with some of the other DJI drones like the Mini 4 Pro, I think, and the Mini or the Mavic 3, I guess. And I'm like, well, this video is not for you guys. For you camera drone pilots that have been watching this, like, hey, the goggles 3 are compatible with more drones. This video has nothing to do with camera drones. This has to do with O4 air unit compatibility. So that's why I mentioned that at the beginning, the context of the O4 Pro and not any of the drones. So if I'm not covering that context of the video here, that wasn't the intention of this video. So I already know that there's some compatibility issues with, it's not as widely compatible compared to the goggles 3. I already know that. Those things might come in the future firmware update, but we don't know that yet. But right now they don't. So if you're one of those pilots that like, hey, I need it to be compatible with a whole bunch more stuff, including camera drones, then of course then the N3 is not going to be for you. So I just wanted to mention that in this video and get that out of the way. So that'll do it for this one. Questions, comments, leave them down below. Talk to you guys in the next one.